Chapter 1. Waking. The veil fractured. Across the expanse, stars winked out of existence. Celestial nomads on their journey across an ever-expanding void, snuffed out in an instant. Their seal was weakening, and it had begun to stir. It writhed in eternal shadow, pulling against star-forged chains. Malevolence strained against stellar bonds, and it was winning. Across the cosmos, innocence slept on. A history rife with war and loss. History the Ashbournes had been at the forefront of since the collapse of the old world. They led the charge into the future, their lineage one of redemption and salvation. Power and wealth beyond imagination. The Ashbourne family had everything to lose. The criminal underbelly of the galactic empire, everything to gain. He stood framed by the door to his bedroom, illuminated from the light dangling in the hallway behind him. He ran his hand along a cheek of stubble, scratching as he watched. The small girl's golden hair poured between her mother's fingers as the soft sound of a lullaby crept forth from the silence. Outside, the moon hung high above, like a surveyor witnessing the vacant city streets. Elias Ashbourne shifted uneasily as a dog down the road started barking. He placed a hand on his hip and held his breath. The girl remained still. A clock ticked softly over his head, reading 11:30. The scent of honey still clung to the air. The pies left to cool, forgotten by the sink, and Serafina continued her lullaby. Elias stepped into the room, softly latching the door behind him. "Do you suppose I should move her to her bed?" She glanced up, just a quick flash of eyes in the dark. Her head shook, and still the lullaby continued. Soothing, nurturing, unaware of the danger creeping through the quiet halls of their estate, like a spectre of smoke, unseen and unheard in the night. "I suppose I'll be sleeping in the study, then?" Serafina nodded, allowing the melody to fade. "She has had a very trying day today. Of all things, neurocircuitry." Elias crossed the space and sat next to her on the bed. His hand found hers, their fingers interlocking, voices dropping. The tension in Elias's shoulder eased as he beheld the sleeping child's soft features. "You know, I really do hate the couch in the study, but advanced neurocircuitry, and at 8 years old no less, it's madness, utter lunacy." She squeezed his hand with reassurance. "She is going to be someone special. I truly believe she will change the world, and she's going to make us filthy rich," he said. Serafina nudged him, eyes rolling. "She was also gifted with your impeccable sense of humor. Thank the stars for that." He bent down and kissed the girl on her brow. "I love you, Vectradalin," he whispered to her as the shadow of a man appeared in the entryway to the master bedroom. Vectra bolted upright in her bunk, sweat dripping from her brow, breath shallow, heart hammering. A standard-issue, thin mattress rested beneath her. The thermal blanket she had gone to sleep under lay discarded on the ground beside her in a pile. She swung her feet over the bed, the marble cool and polished beneath her. Vectra wiped her forehead with an arm, the dream still clinging to her. Recognition dawned slowly. It had been a dream again. The dream? Or was it a memory? She wasn't sure anymore. The memory, if indeed that's what it was a frequent nighttime visitor, an unbidden ghost of her past, her parents sitting at the edge of their bed, her mother humming that familiar tune. Her father, "I love you, Vectra darling." No one else called her that. Flashes of memory played through her mind, her mother and the panic room, the horrible sound of shattering glass and the pleading of her father. But that particular moment, nothing in her memory could lead her to a definitive answer in relation to the validity of the dream. Somewhere deep inside herself, she wished it to be true. She stepped off the bunk and lumbered towards the small quarter's private bathroom, a space just large enough for a sink and a toilet. She twisted the knob for hot, wincing as the aged pipe systems groaned in protest. She watched as the water faded from rusty brown to purest white. Vectra smiled and cupped her hands, splashing the hot water over her face, banishing the ghosts of the night. She blinked away the droplets clinging to her lashes, grabbed the yellow towel off the sink, and dried away the last remnants of nightmares. What was revealed was a rejuvenated and eager young woman. "I am Vectra Adeline Ashbourne. Today I become a regulator. Her reflection, 17 now, stared back, uncertain but determined. Regulator. Elite, feared, respected, and rare. And I am going to be one. Her face hardened, emerald green eyes steady. She ran a finger along her jawline. The bruise had healed nicely, a token of an earlier training session with her, Vectra's training partner for the last 7 years. Today is the day, the start of final exams. A small smile formed on her lips. Today we join legends. Her grin widened. Today we become legends. Vectra pulled her hair tight, tying it into a bun atop her head. The brush lay forgotten on the sink. As she stepped out of the bathroom, the light behind her dimmed and the door slid closed silently. Her bare feet made soft, sticky noises as she crossed to the closet. The interior of the closet was sparse. A few formal garments, a couple standard GP-issued shirts and combat pants. A large grey chest lay on the floor, humming softly. Yet her attention was drawn to the shelf above it all, the small aluminum box. She reached for it with gentle fingertips. Cool to the touch. Inside it was lined with red velvet, soft and supple. Nestled at the bottom was the pendant, in the shape of a star, one of her 2 prized possessions. Her symbol, her identity, star. She wore it proudly. She placed the pendant around her neck and stored the aluminum box back on its shelf. Her fingers lingered for just a moment before she turned to leave. The High Counselor waited. All right, let's do this. The door to her quarters slid closed behind her, boots echoing against the empty halls of the GP headquarters, pendant bouncing against her chest. She didn't look back. With her head held high and her goals clear, Vectra Adeline Ashbourne stepped forth into that which would become legend. End. Chapter 2. Porcelain. Quinn Astra lay in her bunk, eyes wide. The knocking on her door could only be one person. Who else would be knocking at such an hour? She pushed herself upright, feet searching for boots. Hold on a minute, V. What? Quinn's shirt got tangled over her head as her arms searched for sleeves. She stumbled over a pile of clothes and slammed her toe into the corner of her bunk. Damn. Just 1 minute. I'm a mess. Oh, aren't you ready yet? Quinn glanced around her room, still missing a boot, and groaned. She caught a glimpse of herself in the mirror above her dresser. Her long, coffee-coloured hair was a nest of twists and tangles around her head. She tugged her shirt on the rest of the way and pressed her foot into her boot. Make that more like 15 minutes tops. Meet you at the usual spot? There was a brief pause before the muffled words of Vectra's voice came through the door once more. Yeah, that'll be fine. Promise you won't wait until the last minute. Quinn sighed, shaking her head as she kicked the previous night's T-shirt out of her way. No, I promise. Just 15 minutes? With that, she discovered her long-lost second boot, buried under the clothes, next to the box of takeout from 3 nights ago. Now to find that brush. She glanced at the clock, 7:55. She rolled her eyes and chuckled to herself. Only Vectra would leave 3 hours early. 3 final tests before they were regulators in full, given their chosen code names and their own exosuits. She let out a breath, eyeing herself in her mirror. We've got this. True to her word. 15 minutes later, the door to her quarters closed behind her. Quinn found her exactly where she knew she'd be. Atop the hill overlooking the courtyard, a large tree stood defiant against a sea of metallic buildings of arrogance and glass. Vectra was sitting beneath it now, underneath the umbrella of the tree's canopy. What could you possibly be sketching now? I said I'd only be 15 minutes. Vectra's pencil scratched a line across in an arc. Counselor Verus, you're late. It's been 17 minutes. As she spoke, the pencil continued to scratch against the paper. Quinn leaned over her shoulder, eyes dropping to the pad. There he was, Counselor Verus brought to life through pen and paper. Tall and proud, his short grey hair swooped to one side, neat as always. His eyebrows large and overly exaggerated, stretched to the top of his forehead, brought to a point between beady eyes. One foot was caught on a brick labelled Ego. He's tripping over his own ego? Vectra looked up, grinning ear to ear, hilarious, yeah? You'd better not let Varus catch you drawing crude cartoons of him. Or, come on, maybe he would smile for a change, she said, nudging Quinn's calf with her elbow. There was a hint of laughter behind Vectra's words. Vectra held the sketch out at arm's length and turned it slightly. Do you think I made his head big enough? Quinn hadn't expected it. Her response caught in her throat as she unwillingly snorted. That was all it took. The dam had burst, and the wave of Vectra's infectious laughter rang forth across the courtyard. The sound pure and vibrant, like the ringing of a bell. A beautiful sound. Once Vectra got started, Quinn found it impossible to resist. Before long, she too would be lost to laughter. There they were, under the tree, all thought of the upcoming exams lost in that moment. Quinn sat down on the grass next to her, both of them still giggling, threatening to renew into fresh hysterics at any moment. She leaned against Vectra's arm, early morning sunlight twinkling off the lawn in front of them. A pair of birds flew by on a cool breeze, fire-red wings fluttering in the wind. Their song twittered off in the distance as they banked toward the sprawl of Galactica Prime. I'm just grateful Councillor Imari will be present at our tests. Vectra nodded. Imagine having to perform in front of Varus alone. Nightmares are made of more pleasant things. Quinn looked at her. Their eyes met, and they were off again. Two fools on the precipice of something greater than either could hope to imagine. Quinn stepped into the lobby of the GPE headquarters, a rose clutched tightly in one hand. She glanced up to the clock above the reception counter. 9:15. She had plenty of time. Vectra had gone on to the locker rooms to get prepared, whatever that meant. Oh, Miss Astra, good morning, the receptionist behind the counter called. Quinn raised a hand. Morning. Is she in today? The receptionist's eyes fell to the data pad behind the counter, her fingers sliding over the screen with practiced articulation. She is in, dear, but she's had another accident. They ask that you keep from exciting her too much. She's got to lay still. Quinn's jaw clenched as she tried to swallow past the lump forming in her throat. Thank you. I'd like to see her, please. With a nod and the sound of a buzzer, the door to the stairwell behind the counter unlocked. Quinn grasped the handle with trembling fingertips, its brass cold beneath her skin. As she ascended the stairwell, the faint sound of laughter came from down the hall. Cadets rushing to and fro through the corridor of the 14th floor. Quinn tiptoed through the rushing children, carefully making her way to her sister's room. The door admitted her into the room with the expected, "Welcome, Cadet Astra." The interior of the small apartment was dark. Save for the faint light that was emanating from the hallway to the right, she hesitantly made her way toward the open door of Estella's bedroom. Then came the soft sounds of her voice, reciting some kind of complex equation. Relief like water poured over Quinn as she peered around the frame of the door into the bedroom. Estella was sitting upright in bed, datapad clutched in her left hand, her eyes glued to it as always. Around her right arm she wore a thick white cast. This had to be the most recent accident. Quinn shook her head. She knocked gently on the doorframe, pulling Estella's attention from the datapad. "Hey, Stella," she said, examining the cast on Estella's arm. "Oh, you startled me." "Sorry about that," she said, still eyeing the cast. "Oh, you don't have to ask. I know you're going to. We'll spend all this time on pleasantries, prattling on about this and that, only for you to get around to the big question. What did you do this time?" Estella opened her mouth to answer, but closed it, bowing her head. Quinn sat down in the armchair across from the bed, legs crossed. She stretched out her hand, the rose pinched between her index and middle finger. "Brought you the rose, Vectra's treat. She says hello." Estella paused for a moment, eyes darting between the rose and Quinn. "Well, if you must know," she said, taking the rose. "I was trying to move my desk. By myself, and before you yell at me again, I did ask for help. Everyone is always too busy to help the cripple." Quinn sighed, her shoulders dropping a little. "You know I would help you any time, Stella. Why do you keep doing this to yourself? How long is this one going to take to heal?" 2 weeks with supplements," she said, head hanging lower. So it's a fracture, not a full break. Estella nodded and turned her data pad off, placing it on the table next to her bed. Look, I don't mean to be insensitive, but what do I have if something happens to you? You're my only family. I know. I just get tired of being a burden to everyone around me. And to you. Quinn sat staring at the cast for a moment, before she noticed the small black smudge on the opposite side. She stood and crossed to the bed, placing a hand on the cast and turning it towards herself. The word whisper had been scribbled onto the cast with permanent marker. Estella's penmanship was obvious. Her eyes brightened a little as she pulled the cast away. Whisper? It's my pen name. When I write software, I program under the alias Whisper, Quinn smiled. Stella, look at me, she said as she placed a hand on her sister's warm cheek. You are never a burden. Do you understand? Rely on me, on my strength. I have enough for both of us. Quinn flexed her arm in mock bravado, displaying her sculpted bicep. Estella pulled her in, wrapping her arms around Quinn's waist. The action had taken her by surprise. Quinn froze for a hair's breadth before she embraced her younger sister. And when you find your place, the world will love you as I do. Estella's breath caught. A small sob escaped her. I'm sorry, I know. I shouldn't do so much myself. But I just feel so trapped sometimes. I promise I won't overdo it again. This is the last time, I swear. Quinn, satisfied with the answer, gave Estella one final squeeze before releasing her. She stood from the bed and turned toward the doorway. I'll send one of the attendants in with a vase of water for the rose. I came to tell you that my final exam will be starting today. All the hard work I've done. And let's be honest, you too will finally be paying off. Estella perked up at the news, wiping a tear from her cheek. Seriously? That's fantastic. What made it possible? I didn't think there were enough cadets qualified to take the exams this year. I think Catalysta may have pulled some strings. Vectra was accepted as an examinee, even though she's a year too young. Ah, that's wonderful news. So you think you'll pass it then? Are you truly ready? Quinn crossed her arms and leaned against the doorframe. Her brows had come together, a scowl darkening her face. I think maybe? I don't know. Her attention roamed the room, unfocused. Fingers absent-mindedly twisting the end of her ponytail. I know enough to know that I don't know everything, but I have to try. I want to show them what I can do. She smiled at Estella then. So yeah, I think I'm ready. End. Chapter 3. Bonds, Catalysta's words of wisdom echoed. Always be prepared for what you don't expect. Vectra had taken those words to heart during her training exercises, but as she patiently waited to be called, she found it terribly difficult to apply the advice to her current mission. How am I supposed to be 3 steps ahead when neither of us even know what we're about to do? She mumbled. Quinn had gone in the front entrance of the GPE building, leaving Vectra alone with her thoughts. The wait was definitely going to be the worst of it, she was sure. The door to the waiting room popped open, Quinn on the other side. Vectra could tell, without even asking, something was on her mind. Hey, how'd things go with Estella? She's fractured her arm again, she exclaimed as she plopped down next to Vectra. I don't know what I'm going to do with her. I can't be near her all the time. I'm worried she's going to do something worse someday. Stubbornness must be a family trait. Just do what you're already doing. Love and protect her, obviously. Quinn buried her face in her hands. Obviously. But I meant, how can I help her? She desires independence. I can't give her that. Vectra placed a gentle hand on her back, patting softly. You already do. Was her only response. The overhead intercom squealed. Cadets Ashbourne and Astra, you are to report to the front of the stage. The council will see you now. Vectra let out a whoop of excitement. We get to go talk to Verus, she exclaimed, shaking Quinn's shoulders. They stood and crossed to the stage entrance. Quinn sucked in deeply next to her as the door split down the center, 2 halves disappearing into the walls on either side of the threshold. They stepped out into the blinding sunlight. The stage shimmered, heat waves rising off the metallic floor. Vectra's black tank top soaked up the heat like a sponge. She pinched the back of the shirt and pulled it off her skin, already damp with sweat. Wearing white was the right choice. Quinn scoffed. You knew this would be outside. Wearing black was the incorrect choice. Oh, ha-ha! They came to a stop at the edge of the stage, in perfect view of the High Council and the observation deck, the latter of which had been filled with junior cadets from the academy. The 5 members of the council stood as Vectra and Quinn found their places marked on the stage. A roar of applause washed over them from the observation deck above. Seated high above was the High Council: Varus, Feldin, Halora, Imari, and Riven. "Thank you, that will be enough now," came Varus's thick, honeyed voice, amplified by the arena's sound system. "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the 432nd Senior Cadet Assessment." Another wave of applause followed his words, more polite than enthusiastic. He continued, "Next, I would like to welcome to the arena our 2 esteemed proctors for this upcoming series of events." A hushed whisper pooled through the audience. Braille Maneshka and Melvin Thorne. On the far side of the arena, beneath a giant golden archway, 3 people stepped through the entryway. Catalista in front, her shoulder-length silver curls bobbing as she led the group. Behind her, Melvin Thorne, his jet-black hair slicked back, mustache framing his mouth, steel-colored eyes locked on the observation deck. But it was the 3rd member of the group that demanded the attention of everyone in the arena. Braille Maneshka. A lot could have been said about the war-tattered veteran that ducked through the doorway of the arena. His larger-than-life personality, his missing eye and black eye patch, his graying. Lumberjack beard, his voice, like a thunderclap, or the loyalty he showed to his fellow regulators. "Stars, look at the size of him," commented Quinn. Braille lifted a mighty fist into the air. A torrent of applause from the growing crowd answered him. Catalista nudged him with an elbow and shook her head. Vectra tried, but ultimately failed to stifle a laugh. Braille's towering form, cowering behind Catalista's short stature, was an image too funny to ignore. The 3 of them came to rest in front of the stage. Catalista turned, her heels together, right hand raised to her brow, fingers straight, thumb tucked. "Catalista von Rosa, are your regulators ready?" "Yes, sir." He nodded, speaking into the microphone. "Then we, the High Council of Galactica Prime, hereby present unto you a set of 3 tests, in accordance with Statute Number 62, signed on this, the 222nd cycle of the year 4-104 YZ. The examinee must finish the 3 exams listed herein with a total point value of no less than 5. He peered over his spectacles. "Do either of you have any questions?" "No, Councillor Varus," the 2 hopefuls answered in unison. "Then I will proceed." He ran his finger along the yellowing edge of the ancient tome in front of him. His eyebrows rose to the top of his forehead as he continued to drone. Vectra was reminded of a recent sketch of a brick, and another wave of mirth fought to escape. This first test will be a test of stealth. You will be tasked with stealing the flag of your assigned regulator. You, Miss Ashbourne, have been assigned regulator badge number 444, Braille Maneshka. Codename Monolith. Miss Astra has been assigned. The last few words had been drowned out by the voices below. At the word monolith, the observation deck rumbled once again with a fresh wave of excitement. Varus closed his eyes, waiting for them to stop. He rubbed his fingers in circular motions against his temple. Yes, quite exciting. This test is completed once one of the following conditions is met. The examinee successfully retrieves and delivers the flag. The examinee is caught. The examinee retrieves the flag but fails to deliver it. And the examinee retrieves the flag, delivers it successfully, and completes the senior regulator's hidden additional challenge. Varus closed the old book, his eyes locking with Vectra's. He broke the contact almost as fast as it had happened. Vectra hadn't looked away. "Do you both accept these rules as fair and just as they have been presented to you today?" he asked. Vectra raised her chin, her chest puffed out proudly. The star pendant glittered in the sunlight, visible just above the collar of her tank. She squared her shoulders and took a deep breath. A star, ready to shine. "I do," she declared, followed closely by Quinn. The observation deck became a symphony of cheers, clapping, whistling, and boot stomping. All of them on the edge of their seats, eager to witness the coming event. Two of the regulator's top senior operatives against the best the cadets had to offer. The show was about to begin. End. Chapter 4. Cat and Mouse. Varus had seemed even worse than usual today, Vectra thought, as she sat waiting in the locker room of the GP arena. She had never liked Varus very much. She respected him, or maybe it was the position he held in the council that she respected. They had all seemed so high above her standing at the front of the stage, characters larger than life. The decisions they made shaped the very foundations of the Galactica Empire. "Could you sit still for a second?" Vectra's eyes shifted, focusing on the door across from them. She hadn't noticed the back-and-forth rocking motion she had been doing. Quinn was sitting on the bench next to her, leaning forward on her knees, lacing her boot. "Sorry. I'm just eager to get started. I hate waiting," Quinn snickered. "Of course you are, and I know you do. It's just with you rocking back and forth. You're tipping the whole bench." Vectra leaned her head against the locker, staring up at the missing bulb in the light fixture above them. "I can't wait to see what they've got in store for us," she said, pulling the final knot in her laces tight. "I was not expecting either of us to get Braille of all people." Vectra smiled at the thought. Braille Maneshka, senior regulator and certified veteran badass. And you managed to get assigned to Melvin the Brave. I'm not sure which of us has it worse. A chuckle escaped from between Vectra's lips as her face lit up. How awesome is this, though? Finals together. In 3 days we could both be certified regulators. Quinn sighed as she sat upright. Now I know why Catalysta had me study Melvin's history so hard. He's a tactician. I'm in for a world of confusion and puzzles. I would have done better against Braille, I think. Vectra agreed. Melvin the Brave had earned his reputation and would certainly put his assigned cadet through their paces. She began to imagine what Braille might have in store for her. Something large and heavy, potentially a combat scenario, or a gladiator-style battle to the death. The door to the locker room slid open with a soft hiss of pneumatic pressure. Catalysta stepped through, her eyes darting between both girls. She crossed the space between the entryway and the bench in a few quick strides. She stood surveying them, something working deep behind her violet eyes. Vectra's mouth parted slightly as the question formed on the tip of her tongue, but for some reason she found the words difficult to conjure. "Vectra, you are to be tested first. The stage has been set. You're on in 5. She turned to Quinn. "Remain in the lobby until Vectra's examination has concluded. You have both trained and studied hard for this opportunity. I expect you both to do well. Am I understood?" "Yes, ma'am," both girls echoed. With a nod, Catalysta spun on her heels and headed back for the door. She paused for a moment, looking back over her shoulder. "I'm very proud of you both," she said, her voice nearly a whisper, her eyes never quite landing on them. The door shut behind her, leaving the locker room feeling a little bit more charged. The time had finally come. 2 massive doors of reinforced steel lined with accents of gold stood closed at the far end of the arena. Vectra pressed her hand against its cool, smooth surface. On the other side of this gateway, her destiny waited. Anticipation hummed through her like electricity, her heart pounding in her ears. She hopped back and forth on the spot, adrenaline pumping through her veins. Assess the situation, take notes of weak points, move only when certain. Then, with a creak and a groan, the gear in the center of the massive doors began to spin. As if pushed by some invisible titan, the doors themselves started to move slowly away from her. Sunlight poured through the crack, temporarily blinding her. She blinked, eyes adjusting to the brightness of midday. And then she gasped. The stage had been completely transformed. What was once a smooth, unbroken surface had been replaced by a field of green. Trees stood at the foot of the hill across the space, and atop the hill stood a brick warehouse. Well, at least I know where I need to go. The trees were surrounded by small shrubs and tall grass, enough to hide her if she crouched low. Vectra nodded. "Bushes first, then." Varys's voice broke the silence, amplified by the arena's sound system. The first few words lost in a garble of feedback and static. "Gentlemen, the first examination is about to begin. Please hold your applause and comments until the exam has concluded. Cadet Vectra Adeline Ashbourne, are you ready to begin?" She raised a single hand, signaling the affirmative. "Senior Regulator Braille Maneshka, are you ready?" A gong-like resonance emanated from within the warehouse. Vectra gritted her teeth and took off for the brush. She kept low, her feet moving soundlessly through the grass. Once she had made it to the bushes, she positioned herself in the hollow of a lavender bush. Crouching low, she reached forward and moved a branch out of her way. The building was 3 floors, 1 doorway on the north side, 4 windows above the doorway, 2 on either side of it. They were likely to be made of shatter-resistant material. Breaking them for entry would not work, nor would that be stealthy. The east side of the building offered a little more. A loading dock left open and a door next to the dock. The windows on this side of the building were all on the top floor. Would the loading dock be too obvious? She said under her breath. Braille would likely be expecting her to choose the most obvious entry point. Maybe there's an access port on the southern side? Vectra crept around the brush at the hill's base, carefully working her way to the rear of the building. That's when she spotted him. Braille stood just inside the loading bay, hidden by shadow. Had she not have been paying attention, she likely could have run straight into him. To her shock, he was fully armored, wearing his GPA-issued exosuit. The only missing piece was the helmet and visor. His eye, the one covered by the black and red eye patch, was a weakness, though, one she could use to her advantage. She waited until he shifted his gaze to the other side of the field, then darted across a gap in the brush. She dove into a thicket of tall grass, stumbling over a metal grate she hadn't noticed. She fell to her hands and knees, the great ripping holes in her pant leg scraping the skin beneath. Clumsy, she thought, sucking in through her teeth. She paused, breathing through her nose, out through her mouth. Slow and steady, until the pounding in her ears had dulled to a soft thump. Then she pulled the grass to the side, ready to assess her next action. A boarded-up door on the southern side, and a ladder on the west. The ladder was a momentary point of interest. Would a building of this size have roof access? Would I have any other way down? That was all it took for her to write the ladder off as a trap. Braille would easily be able to corner her if he heard her climbing around on the roof. The loading dock was out of the question. She doubted he had left the front door completely open. There had to be something she was missing. She glanced down at the metal grate, and time seemed to stand still. It wasn't a grate at all, but a trap door. A toothy grin flashed across her face. A hidden entrance. What she had taken initially to be a drain was actually the entrance to a tunnel. The padlock on it was old, its iron frame rusted from years of neglect. She held it in her palm, marveling at the level of detail the council had gone into for the exams. She pulled on the lock. It gave way with a snap, crumbling into red flakes in her hand. With Braille on the other side of the building, she was confident opening the hatch wouldn't alert him. Still, when she pulled the hatch open, the squeal of its rusted hinges sent a dagger of panic down her spine. She was sure that the entire arena had heard. She felt it then. The thousands of eyes glued to her. The sudden realization that she was being watched by thousands of her peers. The crowd was another obstacle, she decided. Performing in front of the sprawl of onlookers would allow the council and senior regulators to see how the cadets performed under pressure. She shivered and shook, trying to rid herself of the embarrassment blooming on her cheeks. Still half crouched, trapdoor ajar, she listened for the sounds of Braille's enormous boots. When it didn't come, a sigh of relief escaped her. She steeled herself and jumped into the darkness below. The hatch slammed closed behind her, echoing endlessly against the perfectly smooth walls of the tunnel. Her feet landed with a sickening squelch, buried ankle deep in thick muck. There was no light. The tunnel stretched in both directions, and from her position beneath the beam of light from the grate above, she could see no end to either side. She frowned. Ah, perfect. "So I'm not going to be able to see," she remarked under her breath. Vectra reached out, hands searching until they found the wall. The tunnel was wide enough that she could touch both sides of it with her fingertips. There was a slight incline in the direction she was facing, so, deciding that was the correct way to head, she started up the hill. Toward the warehouse, hopefully. She took a deep breath, her nostrils filling with the scent of earth and something putrid and sour. She yanked her boot free of the sludge, taking another step. Her foot made a wet sucking noise as it broke free. With every step Vectra took, the tunnel's incline gradually increased. The floor, metal and slick beneath the grime, made for treacherous footing. She had lost her balance twice already, slipping backwards down the hill several feet before managing to catch herself. She stepped forward tentatively and felt her rear leg begin to shift. No, not again! Try as she might, gravity won the battle. She pressed her feet out against the walls of the tunnel, bracing herself. Her upper half pitched forwards unexpectedly, hands splayed in front of her. Slunk! Her hands plunged deep into the mysterious substance. A moment of horror flashed across her face as she realized what she was standing in, what she had just dunked her arms up to the elbow in. It wasn't just mud and water. It was waste, raw sewage, sludge from a simulated disposal system. She doubted that there were any active bacteria present, nor would the council place her in such a dangerous situation. However, combined with the texture and smell, the illusion was all too real. The stench alone forced a gag from her throat. Reflex had taken over as she slapped the back of her hand to her mouth. Her hand, still covered in the slurry, was the final shot fired in the war to keep her breakfast. The war had been lost. There went her perfectly good turkey sandwich. I wonder if I'll lose points for that, she thought, wiping bile from her mouth with her shoulder. She gradually straightened herself and pressed forward. Each step was a struggle to maintain footing, blinking tears from her eyes as she went. Then there was light, soft at first. She hadn't even noticed the lightening of the walls. Her hands had edges again, and the greying slime of simulated excrement was coming into form. She didn't notice until she had nearly arrived at the top of the hill, where a lone ladder stretching upward into the ceiling of the tunnel stood waiting, up and out of sight. Light poured from an opening at the top, illuminating the ground. She smiled, slightly weary. Climbing the hill had taken much of her strength, more than she had expected. Yet she smiled all the same. There had been a third entrance into the warehouse. The ladder was cool to the touch. Each rung rough and pockmarked, rust building along their surfaces. She placed her foot on the first rung and began climbing, leaving the stench and slime behind. At the top, she lifted her head just high enough to peek over the lip of the breach. She was in a maintenance room. Large pipes ran along the ceiling, disappearing into the warehouse above the maintenance door. Grey electrical conduits crisscrossed the far wall, connecting to large breaker panels and power cells. Along the back wall was a pegboard. Tools of all shapes and sizes hung in their designated spots. The floor around her was slick with old grease and oil stains, concrete blotched with bruises that would never heal. She climbed the rest of the way out. A single bulb was the only source of illumination, swinging slightly on its chain. She had momentarily considered grabbing a tool to arm herself, but quickly decided against violence as the solution to the problem at hand. Yeah, no. Braille is a tank. What good is a hammer going to serve? Steal the flag. She pressed on towards the maintenance room door, where the pipes and conduits converged. The door was already partially opened, which pleased her. It was open enough that she'd be able to slip through without moving the door. No hinges to sound the alarm, to alert Braille that she had made progress. She peered around the corner of the doorframe. There he was. He still stood just inside the dock door, as he had been when she was outside. To her shock, the light outside had taken on an orange hue. The day had melted away as she fought through the tunnel beneath the hill. The warehouse around the maintenance room was cluttered. A junkyard of discarded vehicles, fractured data pads, broken terminals, crates of all sizes, old farming drones, and even the partial hull of a deep-space GPE cruiser. The abandoned pieces of antiquated machinery were stacked in half-hearted piles. Mounds that stretched towards the ceiling, creating valleys between them. It had to be there, inside the cruiser. She glanced over at Braille. His bad eye was facing her. Vectra crouched and unlaced her boots. Now I need to move without them, she thought, looking back at the footprints left behind. She set them next to the door and took one final look at Braille. Vectra drew a deep breath and darted across the empty aisle, ducking behind an old delivery van. Then, with Braille safely on the other side of the van, she made her way towards the cruiser, every step slow and measured. She tiptoed between debris and shadows, avoiding the spattering of loose items on the ground at her feet. She slithered her way between the mounds of forgotten machinery. Finally, she pressed herself flat against the curved exterior plating of the cruiser. A hatch stood open to her right, but was clearly visible from where Braille was standing. She clenched her jaw and made a break for it, hoping against hope that he hadn't spotted her. Inside, she stopped. Her jaw parted slightly as she beheld the second half of the warehouse. Not the tight corridors of a space-worthy vessel, but the entire second half of the warehouse, clean and empty, deceptively walled off by the cruiser's salvaged plating. In the center of this near-clinical cleanliness stood a lone pedestal. The flag. A small, deep red flag of silk, lying limp against the flagstaff. No taller than 10 inches, the pole wedged into an opening at the top of the white marble pedestal. Her heart skipped a beat, her vision tunneled, and she was off. It started as a walk, then evolved into a run. Before she realized it, she was running full tilt. She reached the flag in seconds and grasped it. It came free with a small metallic click. Vectra tilted her head, frozen on the spot, flag in hand. Alarms blared around her. The shrillness of them ripped through the air like lightning in the dark. Vectra held the flag up. A small wire dangled from the base of the pole. He booby-trapped it? Then, Vectra moved. The sound of thunderous footfalls echoed from the loading dock. Braille had clearly heard the alarm, and he was coming. She dove back through the cruiser's hatch and into the scrapyard of wreckage. She slipped under a rusted truck frame as Braille's boots shook the ground in front of her. It landed inches from her face as he made his way toward the flag's hiding place. At once, all fell silent. Very good, Miss Ashbourne." His voice rang out, deep and unconcerned. "You have at least guaranteed a passing grade for this examination." "Well done indeed." His voice was deep, the sound of boulders crashing together. Terrifying in the gloom of the warehouse. Something massive shifted, a vehicle or crate perhaps. But there is more to stealth operations than laying hands on your target. You've got to smuggle it out. Gaining possession isn't enough. Another crash as another large object hit the floor. He was searching for her. That much she knew. But hadn't he seen her? She felt certain he must have. "Now tell me, Cadet Ashbourne." A dry chuckle shook the air. "Will you manage to smuggle your prize from this place?" The shriek of twisting steel cried out as Braille bent something. She chanced peeking out from underneath her hiding spot, her palms slick with sweat. Braille's back was to her, and above him he held the van she had hidden next to after leaving the maintenance room. Vectra's mouth fell open. "I know you're still in here, little girl. Hiding somewhere, just got to find you." He huffed as the van came crashing down to earth again. Glass shattered and the warehouse shook as it collided with the hard cement floor. Time to go. Vectra waited just a moment longer, waited for Braille to fix his attention on the next potential hiding place. Then she bolted. She sprinted between piles of rust and ruin, weaving like a shadow. She ducked behind a tool cart, breathing fast and shallow. Peeking around the corner, she saw Braille turning in place. In one hand, he held the front of the truck she had hid under only moments before. Way too close. When his good eye was once again turned away from her, she made a break for the front door. She flew out of the front entrance, sunshine blazing reddish-orange as it dipped below the rim of the arena. Vectra zipped down the hill, arms pumping, legs aching. Flag grasped firmly in her left hand. She leaped into the hollow of the lavender bush, back to where it all started, gasping and shaking, but grinning and victorious. She sat for a time, catching her breath. With a look towards the noise coming from inside the warehouse, she dashed to the platform, her starting point, and slammed the flagpole into its cradle. It slid into place, aided by magnets. A second later, an air horn sounded the conclusion of the exam. The sound from the crowd was overwhelming. A cacophony of applause and shouts hurled at her as Vectra turned to face them. The tips of her ears burned, her cheeks reddened, yet still she smiled. "Cadet Ashbourne, please proceed to the front of the stage," came Varus's voice over the intercom. Vectra hurried down the stone steps flanking the stage's right side, fists clenched in anticipation. Catalista was waiting for her at the bottom. "You've done well, Vectra. You've earned at least an acceptable rating," she said in hushed tones matching her pace. There was satisfaction in her voice, and perhaps a hint of pride tucked behind her calm exterior. But something else was there, too. Vectra stepped into the shadow of the projection platform. Braille was already there, his thick arms crossed. Varus stood in the center of the council above the observation deck, his hands clasped behind his back, his expression as cold and distant as ever. Only the gears of duty had kept him present. His voice rang forth, tired and bored. "You have completed the requirements assigned to you for this exam." His eyes rolled. "With an excellent grade, having completed your senior regulator's hidden task." He looked down at her, disgust in his eyes. "Well done indeed." Vectra started. "Excellent?" She looked at Catalista, growing excitement building in her chest. If the announcement of her grade surprised the captain of the regulators, she didn't show it. "Have you any questions, Cadet Ashbourne?" "No, sir. No questions." He gave a curt nod and raised a small remote. With a press of his thumb, the enormous holoscreen behind the council flickered with static. A still image appeared. Vectra, standing on the platform, chin raised, eyes sharp. She looked up at herself, bemused. "I look ready," she whispered with a small, proud smirk. The video began, and the entire arena watched. She watched herself running toward the hill, hiding in the lavender bush, circling around the back, and finding the sewer grate. The screen flickered, showing the interior of the tunnel, bright green with the hue of night vision. She watched in fascinated horror as the holoscreen Vectra climbed through muck and sludge. The audience groaned. An audible wave of revulsion rolled through the air. "Here," Varus started. "You managed to locate the optimal entry point. This hidden route was Regulator Maneshka's hidden challenge." Braille's laughter was thunderous, a full belly laugh. He doubled over, slapping his knee. The observation deck joined in his mirth. Catalista's jawline tightened, eyelids slowly closing. A look Vectra had learned all too well. Braille would be in for it later. Varus narrowed his eyes. A slight edge had crept into his voice. Truly admirable. Vectra flushed, suddenly acutely aware of the grime still clinging to her arms, neck, and face. The video rolled on with her slipping through the maintenance room, passing behind Braille. "Sneaky little mouse," came Braille's voice from her left. The video concluded with her slamming the flag into the pedestal. Fresh applause and shouts from the observation deck. "This council, upon reviewing the footage, confirms your grade of excellent. Your next exam will begin first thing tomorrow morning. A team-oriented affair, if I recall correctly. You are to bring your weapon of choice with you, as you will need it." Varus glanced to his left, Councillor Imari. "Do you have the time confirmed?" Imari, seated once more, glanced at her datapad. "Yes. Cadet Ashbourne is to report to the arena field by no later than 8 o'clock tomorrow morning. On behalf of this council young lady, you've done very well. Congratulations." Vectra beamed up at the older woman, warmth blooming in her heart. Varus, however, scowled. His voice flattened as he continued. "If there are no further questions, you are dismissed to your chambers for the evening, and see to it that you bathe before you present yourself before this council again." He turned on his heel and exited through the side door, robes trailing behind him. The other members of the council followed behind him. Catalista turned to her. "You'd best get washed, Vectra. Quinn's exam will begin after a short recess. You are to stay in your dormitory until Quinn's exam has concluded. Food is to be brought to you later this evening." Vectra looked up at her, eyes shining, smile beaming. "I was great, wasn't I?" Catalista placed her hand on Vectra's shoulder and glanced towards Braille standing nearby. "You did very well today. I am proud of you, but remember, there are still 2 more tests ahead, and they will be harder than this one. Braille has underestimated you. She paused for a moment before looking back. Use it to your advantage, Star. Vectra nodded, her pulse steadying as the adrenaline finally began to fade. She became gradually aware of the demands of her body. Her legs ached, her arms burned, her hair was a mess of sweat and grime. She made her way towards the showers, the red flag still flapping softly in the breeze atop the pedestal. 1 down, 2 to go, end. Chapter 5. Perfect. The night brought with it cold winds and hard rain. It poured down in sheets that moved horizontally for bursts of a few seconds. The wind howled through the alleyways and cracked windows of Galactica Prime. Neon lights cut through the mist with electrical defiance, and somewhere down the street, the soft thump of a dance mix hummed through someone's apartment building. Thump, thump. Hey, V, you awake? Quinn stood with her head against the outside of Vectra's dormitory door, replaying her exam over in her head. The door had opened to reveal, not the stage, but a field with a lake and a house. And the people. Thousands of eyes locked to her. It had shaken her confidence, a variable she hadn't accounted for. Stupid. The dormitory door slid open, unveiling a haggard-looking Vectra. Her hair was still wet, and her eyes were glossy, clearly having just awoken. She yawned and leaned against the doorframe. Sorry, Quinn. I had just dozed off at the desk. Oh, my bad. I had hoped you were still awake. Not to worry, chum. She slapped a hand on Quinn's shoulder. You have mercilessly spared me from a sore neck tomorrow morning. Her grin faltered as her eyes met Quinn's. What happened? Vectra stepped aside to allow her into the room. The dorm was smaller than her room at the GPE headquarters. A small desk was pressed into one corner, a cot parallel to the desk. There was a table against the wall with a door. A small window looked out onto the lights of Galactica Prime below. A brush, her sketch pad, and the nub of a pencil sat undisturbed on the desk. Quinn started slow, gaining momentum as she went. I failed. Well, not failed. Oh, it's a long story. I managed to get the flag, but Melvin caught me before I could escape. Quinn stood on the platform, her muscles vibrating, her chest rising and falling with a slow, steady rhythm. She was ready. No fear, no hesitation. She was prepared to do what she was expected to do. The doors began to shutter, swinging outward. That's when she noticed them. Their eyes. She froze on the spot, her heart refusing to beat for a moment, the tips of her fingers tingling, her vision around the edges dimming. She hadn't thought about performing in front of the audience. As an onlooker, the weight of being judged by so many hadn't presented itself to her. Until that moment. She managed to tear her eyes free of the observation deck. The stage had been set. A lake sat in the center of a vast field. Fog rolled over the surface in ribbons of inky smoke. Night had been fully realized while Vectra performed for her exam. The only illumination came from the rim of the arena. Soft, pale lights that mimicked the full moon on a clear night. Bright enough to see, dark enough to conceal. Across the lake, along the shore, stood a fishing dock. On the other side of that stood a great manor house. The lake house was old, a 3-story monument to a bygone era. Its likeness hadn't been seen in centuries. The porch was supported by tall marble columns, brick stairs leading to the front door. Every window visible to her appeared to have been boarded up. Around the southern side of the lake house there was a small grove of trees, and on the west side a garden. The council sat perched up high above the observation deck, peering down at her, Varus going through the ceremonial slop he had been all day. I really hate all these formalities. Cadet Astra, are you ready to proceed? She raised her hand, and a moment later, Melvin had rung the gong. Move without being seen. Breathe without being heard. All right, Captain, you're the boss. Quinn walked down the path towards the lake, no fear of being seen. Hidden by the gloom and fog, she was confident that she would be able to make it to the house without any issues. She arrived at the far bank of the lake, studying the house as she moved. The siding of the home had begun to peel in places. The smell of mildew hung heavy in the air. Humidity had caused droplets of water to gather on the inside of the windows. As she rounded the corner of the lake, the side of the house now fully visible to her. Quinn's eyebrows furrowed. The windows on this side had also been boarded up. She made her way around to the front of the house, to the front door. She tentatively placed her right foot on the porch and waited for a sign, or sound. Any telltale hint of the senior regulator. When it didn't come, she hoisted herself onto the porch. The boards underneath were weak with rot, but did not give under her weight. She didn't need to worry about someone inside seeing her. These windows, the ones on the porch, had thick timber slabs adhered to them. The front door to the house was faded green, paint peeling away in great strips. Quinn grasped the handle of the front door and turned it. It spun soundlessly in its socket, the latch popping out of the frame. She leaned her weight against the door, a moment of excitement before. It didn't budge. "I knew you'd make things hard for me, old man." An emblem was etched into the door, an upside-down anchor with the skull of a fish positioned beneath it. Melvin Thorne's family crest. She spent the following 2 hours scouring every inch of the exterior of the lake house, the garden, and the paths behind the house in the woods. There was seemingly no point of entry to the building. Was this at one point his home? Rather, had the lake house been modelled after his family's property? Fragments of what she knew of Melvin the Brave flew to the forefront of her mind. After a time, her thoughts brought her attention toward the lake and the retractable fin on the back of his exosuit. Maybe it's in the lake? Out of ideas and options, she left the garden and started toward the lake. The surface of the water was a polished mirror. Not a ripple of movement could be glimpsed upon the plain. The darkened silhouette staring back up out of the depths had an eerie quality. A black blotch where her reflection drowned the light from the rim of the arena. Making her way around the lake, opposite of the side she had started on, she took notice of a faint glow emanating from beneath the dock. A bluish hue was barely visible through the murky water. It's definitely in the lake. Quinn placed her hand atop the first piling, the same family crest rough under her palm. The dock was aged even more so than the house. The wood had sagged in many places and in some cases deteriorated completely. "There is no chance, Mr. Thorne." The glow from beneath the dock was more prominent now that she was near. "I'm going to have to get wet, then, I guess." Quinn sat on the bank and tugged off her boots and socks, and rolled her pant legs up to her thighs. It was a futile attempt to keep as much of her clothes dry as possible. Then, holding her breath, she breached the surface with her bare foot. The water was pleasantly warm, nearly the temperature of a freshly run bath. She slid off the bank, sinking waist deep in the warmth. The bottom of the lake was soft, her feet sinking deeper with every passing second. The muddy floor beneath her disappeared as the water continued to deepen. The glow from the dock was now mere feet from her. She grasped the side and peered underneath. There was a pipe. Straight into the ground beneath the dock. Blue-green lights ran the length of it, little pinpoints of light that marked the pipe's edges. From where she was standing, she could not see the other end. Nor could she see any sign of Melvin. For a moment, Quinn stood staring down the murky depths of the hidden pipe. And what happens if I go under and get lost? Does the council have some safe guard in place to keep me from drowning? A grimace distorted her face as she began to breathe in and out rapidly. 5 deep breaths in, 5 deep breaths out. Then she plunged head first into the hole. Once she was fully inside the tunnel, she forced her eyes open. The world around her was tinged in hues of blue and green, a thick fog keeping her line of sight near. The walls of the pipe curved down into the earth, the curve of the pipe increasing until it ran completely vertical. She pressed forward, chest tightening as she descended. The pipe bent again, like a J-hook, sharply upward. Her arms pulled and her legs kicked furiously as the surface of the water came into view. Her lungs were on fire, and she could feel her body trying to force her to take breath. Just as she was sure it would be too much, she emerged into blessed oxygen-filled air. She crawled out, tired and dripping wet. A small cough escaped her as she wiped the water from her eyes. She rolled onto her back, staring up at the ceiling. Oxygen. Glorious, beautiful oxygen poured into her. Quinn lay there on the stone floor of some musty, damp room, grateful for every breath she took. Gradually her breathing began to slow, her heart to steady. She was in the basement, or was it a cellar? The pipe had led straight into the lake house, one step closer to the flag. A frown gradually began to form on the corners of her mouth, a sense of unease settling over her. "Where the hell are you, old man?" The house above her groaned as if in protest to her arrival. The walls of the basement were bare. No lights, aside from what spilled out of the pipe behind her and that which fell down the stairwell in front of her. The ceiling itself wasn't much of a ceiling, but the subfloor of the level above. Her eyes followed an elongated shadow on the wall to her right to its point of origin. A chair propped up against a doorway that led to a stairwell, the only source of illumination in the gloom. Squeezing the end of her ponytail, she wrung the water from it as she approached the light. Each step she took up the staircase was wrought with tension as the boards beneath flexed under her weight. In 2 places she had chosen to skip a step. The stairs ended in a landing with a single faded white door. She dropped to her hands and knees, pressing her ear against the wood, peering through the gap beneath the door. On the other side was a kitchen. Black and white tiles ran along the old cabinetry. 2 bar stools stood at the kitchen's island, one lying on its side. Long forgotten, covered in a thick layer of dust, the knob for the door was missing. She pressed her palm against it and pushed. The door swung outward on silent hinges, bringing a sigh of relief from Quinn. She stepped fully into the kitchen. Silence met her like a wall. No creaking floorboards or humming appliances, not even the ambient groan of the house, just dust and stillness. She scanned the room slowly. The walls stretched upward like a cathedral, converging to a single point in the center of the room above her. From its center hung an ornate crystal chandelier, casting brilliant sparkles of light onto the vacant kitchen below. The 3 remaining walls were bare aside from the refrigerator on the left side of the island. The stovetop in the center of the island was completely shattered, spiderweb cracks splintering out from a single impact point in the center. Where is the rest of the house? Cabinets opened one by one, revealing dust and frustration. No cups, no silverware, no pots and pans, nothing apart from some wood shavings on the corner of one shelf. She approached the sink, looking into the basin for any clues. Any direction. One of the knobs was missing. She considered it for a moment, trying to determine if it meant anything. Then an idea presented itself. Like a rising sun, it dawned on her. She grasped the handle on the right, old bronze, crusted green at the base, and turned it. It spun freely, but nothing happened. Around and around, the knob went with no resistance. Quinn growled in frustration, pulling the knob completely free of the faucet. It came free of the sink with a pop. It lay in her hand, motionless and meaningless, a cross-shaped chunk of metal with a porcelain circle of white in the center, marked with the Thorne family crest. Why did it have to be puzzles? Quinn bounced the knob up and down in her hand as she walked around the kitchen a 4th time, glancing in each open cabinet as she went. Yet nothing jumped out at her. There were no clues, no hints or signs to aid her, only the knob. Returning to the sink, she studied the threaded connections on each side of the faucet. One side was thicker than the other. It was almost impossible to notice, but once she had, unmissable. She carefully placed her prize over the threaded connection on the left and smiled as it effortlessly grabbed hold of the corkscrew. Once fully tightened, she carefully turned the knob counterclockwise. A hiss had sounded from within the faucet, then a shudder. The entire countertop began to shake. Dust fell from the cathedral ceiling, and the floor vibrated with unseen machinery. The farmhouse basin in front of her split in 2. A crack formed along a hidden seam as the 2 halves slid apart, revealing a shaft beneath. From within the shaft, a brilliant white pedestal began to rise. Atop the raised pedestal was a silky crimson flag. Quinn stepped back, her jaw clenched, fists tightened. Once the pedestal had stopped, she took a hesitant step toward her goal, yet something kept her from reaching forth and grasping victory. She stood back from the flag, hands on her hips, studying the pedestal from across the room. The pedestal was marble, probably. The flagstaff stuck out of the center, unassuming and peaceful. Could this be a trap? If so, removing the flag from the pole would likely be the best option. Quinn stood motionless, waiting, listening. Minutes dragged by as the vibrant red of victory taunted her from the other side of the island. Well, here we go. She crossed to the pedestal and yanked the flag free. It was surprisingly heavy in her hand. She grasped it in a closed fist and turned to leave the way she had come. Quinn had only taken 3 steps before she felt it. A great shudder ran beneath her, the floor vibrating as if some great beast had woken beneath the floorboards. The door to the basement slammed closed, as if swung by some malevolent force. The resounding crash echoed off the cathedral ceiling, cutting the silence with sudden terror. Quinn's blood froze in her veins as some primal instinct flared within her. The soft hiss of electricity caught her attention, followed by the static of a speaker somewhere above her. "Congratulations, Cadet. You have successfully completed the first part of your assignment today. Being a regulator will require you to utilize more than brute strength to achieve your goals. You've proven that you can manage this task," Melvin said from the speaker. "Now that you have secured the flag that I hid for you, let's dive right into the next phase." Quinn stumbled away from the island as it started to rise. The entire room moved skyward. Cabinets, refrigerator, the pedestal and sink, all of it moving in unison. The kitchen had been a facade. The true scale of the space she was in was now clear. As you can now see, a clear path lies before you, young cadet. A doorway on the far side of the room had lit up. All you've got to do now is make it out. Good luck, she realized then. It had been a pre-recorded message, set to play the moment she removed the flag from the stand. As the recording had said, there was a clearly illuminated path before her, inky blackness on all sides around it. She could see the faint outlines of shipping containers stacked precariously around the enormous room, the lights in the ceiling high above barely providing enough light for her to see the distant walls. No way in hell I'm walking straight down the aisle. She glanced to the shipping containers, then back to the door. In a quick, split-moment decision, she bolted for the containers. It was good that she had. A moment later, Melvin had stepped through the door at the end of the room. Exosuit worn proudly. Its midnight blue alloy appeared nearly black in the dim light. "At least you had sense not to stand dead on the spot, and you didn't take the bait of the path." "Good." From his shoulders, 2 spotlights cut through the night. As his eyes shifted, so too did the spotlights. He walked with a casual swagger, boots scraping the floor as he went. "I will say, young lady, I am truly impressed with you thus far. I've used this same test on students in the past. Many of them don't even try the lake. Most of them get stuck in the kitchen." From his belt he pulled a small brass-colored tube. His thumb found a button on its side, a practiced motion. From one end of the tube shot a long, needle-sharp spear. From the other end, a trident. Melvin brandished the trident with experienced hands. He lifted it above his head and brought it down on a wooden crate. The crate split in 2, sliced clean and perfect. "Is he trying to kill me?" She didn't wait any longer. Bracing her foot against one shipping crate, she pushed off, her arms outstretched. She grabbed the top of the adjacent container and pulled herself on top of it. The container made a dull boom as her foot collided with the side. Damn! The trident missed her foot by inches, launched with deadly accuracy from where Melvin stood, now facing her. The weapon quivered, protruding from the side of the metal container where her foot had been only moments before. She rolled to the other side of the container and allowed herself to drop to the ground. The ground was unforgiving, sending a sharp pain up her leg as she landed awkwardly. "Damn!" His footsteps echoed, getting louder as he moved toward her. The sound of metal scraping metal caused her hair to stand on end as he pulled his trident free. Without waiting a moment longer, Quinn ran hard, her feet bare and soundless against the polished concrete floor. Clang! Her foot struck a metal pan she hadn't noticed in the dark. It bounced across the concrete with painful booms of sound. Each impact seemed louder than the last. Damn, damn, damn! She dove behind a stack of oil drums as Melvin's lights spilled over the pan, still spinning slightly. "Aha! You've fallen right into my deviously well thought-out trap." "Trap?" She peered out from behind the oil drums. Melvin's light revealed a veritable minefield of sonic disturbance. Hundreds of similar objects arrayed in a hexagonal pattern lay between her and salvation. "You're quick, though." "Very quick. He turned on the spot, searchlight blazing. Quinn was completely trapped. She had nowhere left to run. The door, which led to a ladder she could now see, was tantalizingly close. If she had just taken a moment to watch where she had been going. Now, though, she had nothing else left to hide behind between the oil drums and the door. She swallowed hard and waited for Melvin's back to be turned to her. Then she made a break for the door. She had made it halfway, only 20 feet from the door, before Melvin had grabbed her around her waist, tackling her to the ground. It was over. She had failed. What would Vectra think? Then a more painful thought came to her, standing before the council as Verus went through the events of her examination 15 minutes later. What would Estella think? She closed her eyes, shame forming mist behind them. Verus's voice bringing her back to the present. You have completed the requirements for this examination in part. Therefore, this council sees fit to award you with an acceptable rating. Acceptable sounds a lot like failure. By collecting the flag and completing your senior regulator's hidden challenge, you are awarded with 2 out of the 3 points. Verus rubbed his eyes, pinching the bridge of his nose. If you have no questions, then I bid you congratulations, and good night, Miss Astra. The rain still hammered against the window of Vectra's dorm as Quinn's story came to an end. It tapped the window like a metronome, steady and hard, as Vectra adjusted the blanket around the two of them. Vectra hadn't spoken, hadn't interrupted. The tea in her mug had gone cold hours ago. You were incredible, Vectra said softly. Quinn didn't respond at first. Her throat moved once, twice, trying to swallow the bitter disappointment the day had brought. I was careless, and I was arrogant. Her head dipped as her eyes fell to the mug cradled in her hands. Thank you, she added. Vectra's hand found the top of her head. You got the flag, you avoided the fake path, and you solved the sync puzzle. I couldn't have done that. Except you and I both know that isn't true. You'd have had that puzzle solved in minutes. I got an acceptable, Vectra. I don't want to be acceptable. I need to be, I don't know, perfect. That seems like a bit of a lofty expectation to put on yourself. Quinn shot her a sharp look as she sipped the cold tea. It was sweet, and still good. You're not perfect, Quinn. That's why I like you. You're flawed just like me, she said, staring out at the rain. We're flawed together. That's what makes us so great. Quinn found herself staring at Vectra instead, drawn to her in the same way she always had been. Her lips were parted slightly, that radiant smile beaming as always. Besides, Vectra added, Verus can choke on his ceremonial robes. Quinn laughed then, cheeks flushed. An image of the esteemed counsellor swallowing the tail of his robes flashed through her head. Vectra laughed too. For the first time that day, Quinn felt the weight of her self-imposed expectations ease a little. They would never truly go away, but maybe, just maybe, she could learn to temper them. End.